Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 3 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-400 Microsoft Certified DevOps Engineer Expert exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends. Then review the correct answer, explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 3. Question number 85. Scenario. A release pipeline deploys an API to a staging environment and runs a performance test. A production release must proceed only when the measured response time is better than the approved baseline, and the team wants a low-maintenance automated control. What should be configured on the production stage? The available options are as follows. Option A, a pipeline artifact. Option B, a repository branch policy. Option C, an Azure Monitor alert notification. Option D, an Azure Pipelines deployment gate. The correct answer is option D, an Azure Pipelines deployment gate. Here's why. A deployment gate can automatically evaluate monitoring or test evidence before the production stage and prevent release until the performance criterion is satisfied. Why are the other options not correct? A pipeline artifact carries files between stages but does not evaluate a performance threshold. B, a branch policy controls changes entering a protected branch, not the runtime performance of a staged release. C, an alert notification reports a condition but does not itself enforce production stage progression. Exam tip. Use a deployment gate when external health, quality, or performance evidence must determine whether a release stage proceeds. Question number 86. Scenario. A bicep module is deployed to several resource groups in each of multiple subscriptions. Every resource group receives one web app, while all resource groups in the same subscription must derive the same app service plan name. Each web app name must remain deterministic for its specific resource group. Select the scope value to pass to unique string for each name. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. To derive the app service plan name consistently within a subscription, use unique string, the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are deployment.name, resource group, .id, subscription.subscription ID, or resource group.name. Statement 2. To derive the web app name consistently within a resource group, use unique string, the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are subscription.subscription ID, deployment.name, resource group.name, or resource group.id. For Statement 1, the correct selection is subscription.subscription ID. The subscription ID is stable across resource groups in the same subscription. For Statement 2, the correct selection is resource group.id. The resource group resource ID is stable for that group and distinct across groups and subscriptions. Exam tip. Choose the unique string seed that matches the desired uniqueness boundary, subscription scope or resource group scope. Question number 87. Scenario. A file named secrets.csv was committed and pushed to a GitHub repository. Deleting the file in a new commit is insufficient because every historical copy must be removed before credentials are rotated. Which two command sequences can rewrite the repository history to remove the file? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. Select exactly 2 answers. The available options are as follows. Option A, run git rm secrets.csv, commit the deletion, and perform a normal push. Option B, run bfg, delete files secrets.csv, and then force push the rewritten references. Option C, run git clean, d, force secrets.csv, and then push the current branch. Option D, run git filter repository, invert paths, path secrets.csv, and then force push the rewritten branches and tags. Option E, run git revert for the introducing commit, and then force push the revert. The correct answers are Option B, run bfg, delete files secrets.csv, and then force push the rewritten references, and Option D, run git filter repository, invert paths, path secrets.csv, and then force push the rewritten branches and tags. Here's why. BFG repository cleaner and git filter repository can rewrite all affected commits to remove the path. The rewritten references must then replace the remote history by force pushing them. Why are the other options not correct? A. Git RM removes the file only from the current and future snapshots. Older commits still contain a secret. C. Git clean deletes untracked working tree files and does not rewrite committed history. E. Git revert adds a new inverse commit but preserves the original sensitive content in earlier commits. Exam tip. After a secret enters Git history, rewrite history, force update affected refs, revoke the secret, and coordinate fresh clones. Question number 88. Scenario. A web app hosted in Azure App Service experienced an outage. An operator wants the built-in diagnostic experience that identifies availability incidents with minimal setup. Which app service diagnostics category should the operator use? The available options are as follows. Option A, diagnostic tools. Option B, availability and performance. Option C, configuration and management. Option D, navigator. The correct answer is option B, availability and performance. Here's why. The availability and performance category contains built-in detectors for downtime, availability, application health, and performance incidents. Why are the other options not correct? A. Diagnostic tools provide supporting utilities, but is not the focused category for identifying outage periods. C. Configuration and management focuses on settings and management changes. D. Navigator helps browse diagnostic experiences, but is not the specific troubleshooting category for availability incidents. Exam tip. Start with availability and performance when the question asks when an app service app was slow, unhealthy, or offline. Question number 89. Scenario. An AKS cluster sends metrics to Azure Monitor Managed Service for Prometheus. A site reliability engineer needs to query those time series metrics to analyze cluster performance. Which query language should the engineer use? The available options are as follows. Option A, KQL. Option B, PromQL. Option C, PL/SQL. Option D, Spark SQL. The correct answer is option B, PromQL. Here's why. Azure Monitor Managed Service for Prometheus stores and exposes Prometheus metrics that are queried by using Prometheus query language. Why are the other options not correct? A. KQL is used for Azure Monitor logs and log analytics data rather than native Prometheus metric queries. C. PL/SQL is an Oracle database procedural language. D. Spark SQL queries structured data through Apache Spark and is unrelated to Prometheus. Exam tip. Use PromQL for Prometheus metrics and KQL for log analytics log data. Question number 90. Scenario. An Azure DevOps team is designing a dashboard for workflow, iteration throughput, and incident recovery. Drag the most appropriate widget type to each metric. Each widget type may be used once, more than once, or not at all. The available source items are as follows. Source item 1, velocity. Source item 2, cycle time. Source item 3, burn down. Source item 4, lead time. The destination requirements are as follows. Destination A, elapsed time from work item creation until completion. Destination B, number of backlog items completed during an iteration. Destination C, elapsed time from starting incident remediation work until the failed service is restored. The first correct mapping is lead time, mapped to elapsed time from work item creation until completion. The second correct mapping is velocity, mapped to number of backlog items completed during an iteration. The third correct mapping is cycle time, mapped to elapsed time from starting incident remediation work until the failed service is restored. Here's why. Lead time includes the full interval from request creation to completion, velocity measures completed backlog work per iteration, and cycle time measures elapsed active work, which can be applied to incident remediation work. Exam tip. Use lead time for end-to-end flow, velocity for iteration throughput, and cycle time for active work duration. Question number 91. Scenario. A platform team analyzes API transaction logs by using this KQL query. API transactions were received at equals datetime, January 1st, 2026, project received at, completed at, request ID, region, preview equals substring, message, 0, 60, extend latency equals completed at, Received at where latency, 1H order by latency desk. Complete each statement about the query output. Statement 1. The results set contains the blank columns. The choices for Statement 1 are 4, 5, 6, or 7. Statement 2. The latency column has the blank data type. The choices for Statement 2 are date time, long, string, or time span. For Statement 1, the correct selection is 6. 5 projected columns plus the extended latency column are returned. For Statement 2, the correct selection is time span. A datetime subtraction evaluates to a time span. Exam tip. In KQL, project controls the current column set, while extend adds calculated columns to that set. Question number 92. Scenario. A GitHub repository named Inventory API is owned by Contoso Labs. The repository contains a workflow file named ci.yml. A DevOps engineer will add a workflow status badge to readme.md. The badge path uses this pattern. First segment, /, second segment, /actions, /workflows, ci.yml /badge.svg. Select the value represented by each path segment. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. The first segment must contain the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are workflow name, repository owner, branch name, or repository name. Statement 2. The second segment must contain the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are badge type, branch name, repository owner, or repository name. For Statement 1, the correct selection is repository owner. The first path component identifies the user or organization that owns the repository. For Statement 2, the correct selection is repository name. The repository name follows the owner in the GitHub URL. Exam tip. A GitHub workflow badge path begins with owner/repository before the actions/workflows segment. Question number 93. Scenario. A .NET library named orders. Core has been packed as bin/release orders. Core.2.4.0.nuc. A GitHub package's NuGet source named GitHub is already configured. The package must be uploaded by using a personal access token. The command must follow this structure. Command. Operation. bin/release orders. Core.2.4.0.nuc. API key package _token. Source. GitHub. Complete the publishing command. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Replace command with the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are .NET, Git, Make, or NPM. Statement 2. Replace operation with the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are NuGet add source, NuGet push, pack, or publish. For Statement 1, the correct selection is .NET. .NET is the executable that hosts the NuGet CLI commands. For Statement 2, the correct selection is NuGet push. NuGet push uploads an existing .NUC file to the configured source. Exam tip. Use .NET NuGet push to publish a built NuGet package. .NET Pack creates the package. Question number 94. Scenario. A platform repository contains one bicep file that deploys a virtual network and another bicep file that deploys an app service workload. A new orchestration file must invoke both existing deployments without duplicating their resource definitions. Which declaration should the orchestration file use to compose the existing bicep files? The available options are as follows. Option A, output declarations. Option B, module declarations. Option C, resource declarations. Option D, parameter declarations. The correct answer is Option B, module declarations. Here's why. A bicep module references another bicep file and lets an orchestration file reuse its deployment logic with parameters and outputs. Why are the other options not correct? A. Outputs expose values after deployment, but do not invoke another bicep file. C. Resource declarations define resources directly and would duplicate the existing definitions. D. Parameters accept input values, but do not compose separate templates. Exam tip. Use modules to compose reusable bicep files. Use parameters for inputs and outputs for return values. Question number 95. Scenario. A retail platform deploys a collection of microservices. The release process must expose the candidate version at a separate validation URL, promote it by switching production traffic with minimal reconfiguration, and restore the previous release rapidly if validation fails after cutover. Which deployment strategy should the DevOps team implement? The available options are as follows. Option A, progressive exposure. Option B, A/B testing. Option C, blue-green deployment. Option D, feature flags. The correct answer is option C, blue-green deployment. Here's why. Blue-green deployment maintains two complete environments. The inactive environment can be validated through its own URL, promoted by switching traffic, and rolled back by routing traffic to the previous environment. Why are the other options not correct? A. Progressive exposure gradually increases the audience rather than performing a rapid environment cutover. B. A/B testing compares variants for different audiences and is not primarily a rollback strategy. D. Feature flags control feature availability inside deployed code, but do not provide two complete deployment environments. Exam tip. Choose blue-green for separate validation endpoints, fast cutover, and fast rollback between complete environments. Question number 96. Scenario. A media company releases changes to a microservices platform. Operations must observe telemetry while the new version is rolled out gradually and must control the size of each user cohort that receives the release. Which deployment strategy best satisfies the requirements? The available options are as follows. Option A, feature flags. Option B, blue-green deployment. Option C, progressive exposure. Option D, A/B testing. The correct answer is option C, progressive exposure. Here's why. Progressive exposure releases the new version to controlled cohorts and expands the audience while telemetry is evaluated at each stage. Why are the other options not correct? A. Feature flags separate feature release from code deployment, but do not inherently define a gradual deployment cohort strategy. B. Blue-green switches traffic between two complete environments and is optimized for cutover and rollback. D. A/B testing compares user behavior between variants rather than progressively increasing one release's exposure. Exam tip. Use progressive exposure when rollout size must increase gradually under continuous monitoring. Question number 97. Scenario. A GitHub organization configures its policy to restrict access through personal access tokens. Classic. The organization owns public and private repositories. Some developers also use SSH keys that were created while authenticating with classic personal access tokens. Complete each statement about the restriction policy. Statement 1. A classic personal access token the blank access public resources owned by the organization. The choices for Statement 1 are can, cannot, or must receive organization approval to. Statement 2. An SSH key created by using a classic personal access token the blank continue to access organization resources after the restriction is enabled. The choices for Statement 2 are can, cannot, or must be regenerated to. For Statement 1, the correct selection is can. GitHub's token policy does not remove access to public organization resources. For Statement 2, the correct selection is can. The PAT restriction does not revoke SSH keys that were created through the token. Exam tip. GitHub PAT restrictions affect token-based organization access, not public resource access or existing SSH keys. Question number 98. Scenario. An Azure repos repository contains a compiled application. GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps is enabled, and an Azure pipeline must perform CodeQL code scanning by using the advanced security tasks. Map the 3 required tasks to their execution positions. Not every source item is used. The available source items are as follows. Source item 1. Advanced Security Perform CodeQL Analysis. Source item 2. Microsoft Purview Data Map Scan. Source item 3. Advanced Security Auto Build. Source item 4. Advanced Security Dependency Scanning. Source item 5. Advanced Security Initialize CodeQL. The destination requirements are as follows. Destination A, first code scanning task. Destination B, second code scanning task. Destination C, third code scanning task. The first correct mapping is Advanced Security Initialize Code QL, mapped to first code scanning task. The second correct mapping is Advanced Security Auto Build, mapped to second code scanning task. The third correct mapping is Advanced Security Perform Code QL Analysis, mapped to third code scanning task. Here's why. Code QL must first initialize its database and language configuration. The application is then built so Code QL can observe compilation, after which the analysis task evaluates the populated database and publishes findings. Exam tip. The standard compiled code QL flow is initialize, build, then analyze. Question number 99. Scenario. An Azure pipeline runs a large suite of unit and integration tests for every commit. The team wants faster feedback while continuing to enforce its existing code coverage policy and periodically execute the full test suite. Which Azure Pipeline's capability should the team enable? The available options are as follows. Option A, purchase additional parallel jobs. Option B, enable test impact analysis. Option C, create another agent pool. Option D, enable flaky test management. The correct answer is option B, enable test impact analysis. Here's why. Test impact analysis maps tests to change source code and runs the impacted tests for faster feedback while allowing scheduled full suite runs to refresh the mapping and preserve the broader quality policy. Why are the other options not correct? A. Extra parallel jobs increase concurrency, but do not identify which tests are affected by a code change. C. A new agent pool organizes agents, but does not by itself reduce the executed test set or add concurrency. D. Flaky test management helps identify intermittent failures, but does not shorten normal unit and integration test execution. Exam tip. TIA reduces test duration by selecting impacted tests. Periodically run the full suite to refresh the impact map. Question number 100. Scenario. A team tracks delivery work on an Azure Boards board and stores its product documentation in a GitHub readme.md file. The README must display the current board status by using the built-in Azure Boards badge with the least configuration effort. What should the team configure first? The available options are as follows. Option A. Install the Azure Boards app from GitHub Marketplace. Option B. Create a GitHub Personal Access Token. Option C. Enable GitHub annotations for the board. Option D. Allow anonymous users to access the board status badge. The correct answer is option D. Allow anonymous users to access the board status badge. Here's why. The built-in board status badge is embedded as an image in readme.md. Enabling anonymous badge access allows GitHub to render the badge without an Azure DevOps sign-in. Why are the other options not correct? A. The Azure Boards GitHub app links GitHub development activity to work items, but is not required to render the board badge. B. A PAT would add credential administration and should not be embedded in readme.md. C. GitHub annotations are unrelated to Azure Boards status badges. Exam tip. For a README-hosted Azure Boards badge, enable anonymous badge access and embed the generated markdown. Question number 101. Scenario. An Azure Repos repository has commit mention work item resolution enabled. A bug work item has ID 842. A commit will be merged into the repository's default branch, and the commit message must transition the bug to its completed state. Which text should the developer include in the commit message? The available options are as follows. Option A. Verifies number 842. Option B. Resolve number 842. Option C. Fixes number 842. Option D. Number 842 completed. The correct answer is option C. Fixes number 842. Here's why. Azure Repos recognizes fix, fixes, and fixed as resolution keywords. When the commit reaches the default branch through a supported workflow, fixes number 842 attempts to move the linked work item to its completed state. Why are the other options not correct? A. Verifies is not a supported resolution keyword. B. Resolved is not one of the supported resolution keywords. D. Placing completed after the work item ID does not create a valid resolution mention. Exam tip. For Azure repos resolution mentions, use fix, fixes, or fixed before the hashtag work item ID. Question number 102. Scenario. Two Azure Boards work items are named API Contract and Mobile Client. Mobile Client cannot be completed until API Contract is finished. The team must represent this dependency by using a system-defined dependency link. Which action correctly creates the relationship? The available options are as follows. Option A. Open API Contract and add Mobile Client as its successor. Option B. Open Mobile Client and add API Contract as its successor. Option C. Open Mobile Client and add API Contract as its parent. Option D. Open API Contract and add Mobile Client by using the related link type. The correct answer is option A. Open API Contract and add Mobile Client as its successor. Here's why. API Contract must finish first, so it is the predecessor. Mobile Client depends on it, and is therefore the successor linked from API Contract. Why are the other options not correct? B. Adding API Contract as a successor of Mobile Client reverses the dependency. C. Parent/child represents hierarchy, not execution dependency. D. Related is a non-directional association and does not express predecessor/successor order. Exam tip. The item that must finish first is the predecessor. The dependent item is the successor. Question number 103. Scenario. An Azure pipeline must execute automated tests, fail when a test fails, and publish JUnit results even when an earlier step fails. A proposed YAML pipeline contains only the following task. Publish test results at 2 condition. Always. Inputs. Test results format. JUnit test results files. ***/ JUnit. XML fail task on missing results file. True. Does the proposed YAML, by itself, satisfy all the requirements? The available options are as follows. Option A. Yes. Option B. No. The correct answer is option B. No. Here's why. Publish test results at 2 publishes existing result files, but does not execute tests. Fail task on missing results file fails only when the file is absent, not when a test result records failures. A separate test execution step and appropriate failure behavior are required. Why are the other options not correct? A. Condition. Always. Ensures the publishing task runs after earlier outcomes, but it does not run the tests or independently enforce test failure handling. Exam tip. Test execution and test result publication are separate pipeline responsibilities. Question number 104. Scenario. A delivery platform uses an Azure Pipeline's self-hosted agent pool running on 2 Azure virtual machines. Both agents deploy bicep templates to the same subscription. The team wants one credential-free Azure identity shared by both virtual machines and wants to minimize identity administration. What should the team create first? The available options are as follows. Option A. An Azure automation account. Option B. A service principal with a client secret. Option C. A user-assigned managed identity. Option D. A separate system-assigned managed identity on each virtual machine. The correct answer is option C. A user-assigned managed identity. Here's why. A user-assigned managed identity can be created independently and assigned to both agent virtual machines, giving the pool one reusable credential-free identity with centrally managed permissions. Why are the other options not correct? A. Azure automation is not required for Azure Pipeline's agents to authenticate to deployments. B. A client secret service principal introduces a long-lived credential and more rotation effort. D. System-assigned identities are unique to each virtual machine, creating separate identities and role assignments. Exam tip. Use a user-assigned managed identity when multiple Azure resources must share one identity. Question number 105. Scenario. A deployment operator runs an ARM template that references a secret stored in an Azure Key Vault. The operator must receive only the permission needed for template deployment, and the vault must permit Azure Resource Manager to retrieve the reference secret during deployment. Select the required permission and key vault creation setting. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Grant the operator the blank permission. The choices for Statement 1 are Microsoft.KeyVault/vaults/deploy/action, Microsoft.KeyVault/vaults/keys/read, or Microsoft resources/subscriptions/resource groups/read. Statement 2. Create the key vault with the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are bypass, enable RBAC authorization, enabled for deployment, or enabled for template deployment. For Statement 1, the correct selection is Microsoft.KeyVault/vaults/deploy/action. This is the least privileged deployment action required for ARM template secret references. For Statement 2, the correct selection is enabled for template deployment. This setting allows Azure Resource Manager template deployments to obtain vault secrets. Exam tip: ARM template secret references require both vault deployment permission and template deployment enablement. Question number 106. Scenario: a GitHub repository is connected to Azure boards. A pull request must link to work items 610, 611, and 612. When the pull request is merged into the default branch, only work item 610 must transition to done, which text should be included in the pull request description or a commit message. The available options are as follows. Option A, fixes AB number 610, AB number 611, AB number 612. Option B, AB number 610, AB number 611, AB number 612, fixes AB number 610. Option C, done number 610, number 611, number 612. Option D, fixes hashtag AB610, links hashtag AB611, hashtag AB612. The correct answer is option B. AB number 610, AB number 611, AB number 612, fixes AB number 610. Here's why. Each AB hashtag mention links the GitHub change to the corresponding Azure Boards work item. Only AB number 610 is preceded by the supported fixes keyword, so only work item 610 is transitioned to done. Why are the other options not correct? A. Prefixing the combined list with fixes can produce unintended or incomplete completion behavior and does not explicitly limit completion to 610. C. GitHub to Azure Boards links require the AB hashtag syntax. D. Hashtag AB is not the supported work item mention format. Exam tip: use AB hashtag ID to link GitHub activity and fixes AB hashtag ID only for the work item that must be completed. Question number 107. Scenario: an Azure Pipelines YAML file defines one pool and a steps collection containing 3 tasks. The tasks reference $build platform, $build configuration, and $system.default working directory. The pipeline does not define any stages. Build platform and build configuration are supplied as custom pipeline variables. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. $system.default working directory is a predefined Azure Pipelines variable. Statement 2. The YAML pipeline contains 3 stages. Statement 3. $build platform is a predefined Azure Pipelines variable. Statement 1. $system.default working directory is a predefined Azure Pipelines variable. The answer is yes. Azure Pipelines supplies this predefined path for the checked out source directory. Statement 2. The YAML pipeline contains 3 stages. The answer is no. The pipeline contains 3 tasks under steps and defines no stages. Statement 3. $build platform is a predefined Azure Pipelines variable. The answer is no. Build platform is supplied as a custom pipeline variable. Exam tip: do not confuse tasks with stages and distinguish documented predefined variables from organization-defined variables. Question number 108. Scenario: an Azure Pipeline stage contains these job dependencies. Job build has no dependencies. Jobs unit test and security scan both depend on build. Job package depends on unit test and security scan. Job published depends on unit test and package. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Unit test and security scan can run concurrently after build succeeds. Statement 2. Package can start before unit test completes. Statement 3. Publish can start before security scan completes. Statement 1. Unit test and security scan can run concurrently after build succeeds. The answer is yes. Both jobs depend only on build, and neither depends on the other. Statement 2. Package can start before unit test completes. The answer is no. Package explicitly depends on unit test and security scan. Statement 3. Publish can start before security scan completes. The answer is no. Publish waits for package, and package cannot complete until security scan completes. Exam tip. A job starts only after every job in its depends on graph has satisfied its condition. Question number 109. Scenario. An ARM template uses an if function to return ready when the isReady parameter is true and pending otherwise. The template is being converted to bicep. Which bicep expression implements the same conditional logic? The available options are as follows. Option A, if is ready, ready, pending. Option B is ready, ready, pending. Option C, IIF is ready, ready, pending. Option D, if is ready, ready else, pending. The correct answer is option B, is ready, ready, pending. Here's why. Bicep uses the ternary conditional operator condition, true value, false value to select between two expressions. Why are the other options not correct? A. Bicep does not use the ARM template if function syntax for this expression. C. IIF is not the bicep conditional operator. D. Bicep does not use an if/else expression in this form. Exam tip. Convert ARM if condition A, B expressions to the bicep ternary form condition A, B. Question number 110. Scenario. A platform team standardizes new Azure pipelines definitions. One corporate standard must constrain the overall pipeline structure and reject disallowed tasks. Another standard provides a reusable first stage that installs approved toolchain prerequisites. Match each standard to the most appropriate template mechanism. The left side items are as follows. Left item 1. Enforce the approved pipeline structure and security restrictions. Insert the reusable prerequisite stage into new pipelines. The right side choices are as follows. Right option A. An includes template. Right option B. An extends template. Right option C. A self-hosted agent. Right option D. A pipeline permission. The correct matches are as follows. Left item 1. Enforce the approved pipeline structure and security restrictions. The correct match is an extends template. Left item 2. Insert the reusable prerequisite stage into new pipelines. The correct match is an includes template. Here's why. An extends template controls the outer pipeline schema and can reject prohibited content. An includes template inserts reusable stages, jobs, or steps into a consuming pipeline. Exam tip. Extends templates govern pipeline structure. Includes templates insert reusable content. Question number 111. Scenario. A GitHub app is registered and installed in an organization. Its app ID and private key are stored as encrypted GitHub action secrets. A workflow must authenticate as the app installation and call an organization REST API. Arrange the runtime actions in the required order. The available items are as follows. Item 1. Exchange the JWT for an installation access token. Item 2. Send the API request with the installation access token. Item 3. Load the app ID and private key from the encrypted secrets. Item 4. Generate a short-lived JSON web token signed with the private key. The correct sequence is as follows. First, load the app ID and private key from the encrypted secrets. Second, generate a short-lived JSON web token signed with the private key. Third, exchange the JWT for an installation access token. Fourth, Send the API request with the installation access token. Here's why. The app ID and private key are required to sign the JWT. The JWT authenticates the app when requesting a short-lived installation access token, which is then used for installation-scoped API requests. Exam tip. A GitHub app JWT authenticates the app. An installation token authorizes access to installed resources. Question number 112. Scenario. A custom test runner writes files that match /test.trx. An Azure pipeline will publish those files by using publish test results and search from $system.default working directory. Which test results format must be configured for the .trx files? The available options are as follows. Option A, NUnit. Option B, JUnit. Option C, VSTist. Option D, CTist. The correct answer is option C, VSTist. Here's why. .trx is the Visual Studio test results format, so published test results must use the VSTist result format. Why are the other options not correct? A. NUnit typically publishes NUnit XML rather than .trx. B. JUnit uses JUnit style XML result files. D. CTist produces CTist result output, not Visual Studio.trx files. Exam tip. Match the publisher format to the file schema. .trx corresponds to VSTist. Question number 113. Scenario. A classic Azure Pipelines release deploys an application to Ring A and then Ring B. Ring A must not be considered complete until an automated check confirms that no active Azure Monitor alerts exist for the Ring A resources. The release should then proceed to Ring B without manual intervention. Where should the team configure the Azure Monitor query? The available options are as follows. Option A, as a pre-deployment gate on Ring B. Option B, as a post-deployment gate on Ring A. Option C, as a post-deployment approval on Ring A. Option D, as a pre-deployment gate on Ring A. The correct answer is option B, as a post-deployment gate on Ring A. Here's why. A post-deployment gate evaluates Ring A after deployment and prevents that stage from being marked successful until the Azure Monitor condition is satisfied, thereby controlling progression to Ring B. Why are the other options not correct? A. A pre-deployment gate on Ring B can block the next deployment, but does not make Ring A's completion depend on its own post-deployment health. C. An approval is manual and does not query Azure Monitor automatically. D. A pre-deployment gate on Ring A runs before the version is deployed and cannot validate the deployed release. Exam tip. Use post-deployment gates to validate the health of the environment just deployed before advancing. Question number 114. Scenario. A new Azure Artifacts feed must expose for views named at local, at pre-release, at release, and at latest. Which view must the feed administrator create because it is not included by default? The available options are as follows. Option A, at pre-release. Option B, at latest. Option C, at local. Option D, at release. The correct answer is option B, at latest. Here's why. New Azure Artifacts feeds include at local, at pre-release, and at release by default. At latest is an additional custom view and must be created manually. Why are the other options not correct? A at pre-release is a default feed view. C at local is the default view that contains directly published and saved upstream packages. D at release is a default feed view. Exam tip. Remember the 3 default Azure Artifacts views at local, at pre-release, and at release. Question number 115. Scenario. An Azure pipeline deploys an application to test and then production environments. Before any production deployment begins, the pipeline must automatically verify that performance validation and test has produced no active Azure Monitor alerts. The control should be managed outside the YAML file. What should the team configure? The available options are as follows. Option A, a post-deployment approval on the test stage. Option B, an Azure Monitor alert check on the production environment. Option C, a branch status check on the production branch. Option D, an Azure Monitor alert check on the test environment. The correct answer is option B, an Azure Monitor alert check on the production environment. Here's why. Checks configured on the production environment run before a stage can consume that protected resource. The check can query alerts associated with the test validation target and block production without changing YAML. Why are the other options not correct? A. A post-deployment approval is manual and does not query Azure Monitor. C. A branch status check validates source control conditions rather than runtime performance alerts. D. A check on the test environment runs before deploying to test, not between test validation and production deployment. Exam tip. Place a check on the environment whose deployment must be blocked, even when the check evaluates another environment's health. Question number 116. Scenario. A classic Azure Pipelines release must query an Azure Board's work item query before deploying to production. Deployment can proceed only when the query returns no active blocking issues. Which control should the release definition use? The available options are as follows. Option A, post-deployment approval. Option B, manual validation. Option C, pre-deployment gate. Option D, pre-deployment approval. The correct answer is option C, pre-deployment gate. Here's why. The query work items gate can execute an Azure Board's query before the production deployment and allow the release to continue only when the returned item count satisfies the configured threshold. Why are the other options not correct? A. A post-deployment approval occurs after deployment and is manual. B. Manual validation pauses for human input rather than automatically evaluating an Azure Board's query. D. A pre-deployment approval requires a person and does not query work items. Exam tip. Use a pre-deployment gate for automated health or work item checks before a classic release stage. Question number 117. Scenario. A GitHub Enterprise Cloud organization contains many eligible C# repositories. The security team wants to enable CodeQL code scanning across all eligible repositories centrally and avoid committing a separate workflow file to every repository. Which approach should the organization use? The available options are as follows. Option A. Enable Dependabot security updates for every repository. Option B. Apply an organization security configuration that enables CodeQL default setup. Option C. Push an advanced CodeQL workflow independently to every repository. Option D. Enable Dependabot alerts at the enterprise level. The correct answer is option B. Apply an organization security configuration that enables CodeQL default setup. Here's why. GitHub can enable CodeQL default setup centrally for all eligible repositories through organization security configuration, avoiding a separately maintained workflow in every repository. Why are the other options not correct? A. Dependabot security updates address vulnerable dependencies, not CodeQL analysis of first-party code. C. Per repository advanced workflows add administration and are unnecessary for eligible repositories that can use default setup. D. Dependabot alerts identify vulnerable dependencies and do not enable CodeQL code scanning. Exam tip. Use organization-level default setup for broad CodeQL coverage. Use advanced workflows only when custom build or analysis control is required. Question number 118. Scenario. A release engineer must create a lightweight Git tag named version 5.2.1 for the current commit and publish that tag to the origin remote. Which two commands should the engineer run? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Select exactly two answers. The available options are as follows. Option A, git commit, m, tag version 5.2.1. Option B, git push origin version 5.2.1. Option C, git tag version 5.2.1. Option D, git add version 5.2.1. Option E, git push, force. The correct answers are option B, git push origin version 5.2.1, and option C, git tag version 5.2.1. Here's why. Git tag version 5.2.1 creates the local lightweight tag at the current commit. Git push origin version 5.2.1 sends that specific tag to the origin remote. Why are the other options not correct? A. A commit message does not create a git tag. D. Git add stages files and cannot create a tag. E. A force push is unnecessary and risky for publishing a new tag. Exam tip. Create a tag locally with git tag, then publish it explicitly with git push origin tag. Question number 119. Scenario. A GitHub repository's default branch is deployed automatically after changes are merged. The application security team must review every pull request that changes protected application code before the pull request can merge. Which two configurations should the repository administrator implement? Select exactly two answers. The available options are as follows. Option A. Require signed commits on all feature branches. Option B. Add the application security team to a code owner's file for the protected paths. Option C. Add a license file to the repository. Option D. Protect the default branch and require review from code owners. Option E. Protect only the feature branches. The correct answers are Option B. Add the application security team to a code owner's file for the protected paths, and Option D. Protect the default branch and require review from code owners. Here's why. Code owners identifies the security team as the owner of the protected paths. A default branch protection rule that requires code owner review prevents merging until an authorized owner approves the pull request. Why are the other options not correct? A. Signed commits verify commit identity, but do not require security team review. C. A license file defines licensing terms and has no review enforcement function. E. Protecting only feature branches does not enforce the required review at the merge boundary of the deployed default branch. Exam tip. Code owners assigns reviewers. Branch protection makes their approval mandatory. Question number 120. Scenario. An Azure Data Explorer table named Gateway Connections contains timestamp and client IP columns. A query must count inbound connections for each client IP during the second quarter of 2022. The result must contain exactly two columns named number of requests and source IP. Which KQL query meets the requirements? The available options are as follows. Option A. Gateway connections where timestamp between datetime, April 1st, 2022, datetime, July 1st, 2022, count. Option B. Gateway connections where timestamp equals datetime, April 1st, 2022, and timestamp datetime, July 1st, 2022, summarize number of requests equals count. By source IP equals client IP project number of requests, source IP. Option C. Gateway connections summarize source IP equals count. By number of requests equals client IP, where timestamp equals datetime, April 1st, 2022. Option D. Gateway connections where timestamp equals datetime, January 1st, 2022, and timestamp datetime, April 1st, 2022. Project number of requests equals count. Source IP equals client IP. The correct answer is Option B. Gateway connections where timestamp equals datetime, April 1st, 2022, and timestamp datetime, July 1st, 2022, summarize number of requests equals count. By source IP equals client IP project number of requests, source IP. Here's why. The query applies an inclusive start and exclusive end for the second quarter, groups records by client IP, aliases the grouping column as source IP, counts each group as number of requests, and projects exactly the required columns. Why are the other options not correct? A. Count returns one total and does not group by source IP or produce the required columns. C. The summarized aliases are reversed, and timestamp is unavailable after the invalid aggregation. D. The date range is the first quarter, and count cannot be used in project without aggregation. Exam tip. For parenity counts in KQL, filter first, then use summarize count by the grouping key. Question number 121. Scenario. A media company runs JUnit tests in every Azure pipeline's execution. The test publisher must still run after an earlier task fails, but it must not run after the pipeline is canceled. Failed tests must fail the pipeline. The team adds the following task. Publish test results at to condition, not canceled. Inputs, test results format, JUnit test results files, **results /JUnit * XML, fail task on failed tests, true test run title. Portal tests, does this configuration satisfy all the requirements? The The available options are as follows. Option A, no. Option B, yes. The correct answer is option B, yes. Here's why. Publish test results at 2 publishes the JUnit files. Fail task on failed tests fails the task when the published run contains failed tests and not canceled. Allows the task to run after success or failure while suppressing it after cancellation. Why are the other options not correct? A. The proposed task satisfies all 3 requirements. It is not limited to successful preceding steps, and it uses the correct failed test input. Exam tip. Use fail task on failed tests for failed tests. Fail task on failure to publish results addresses publishing errors instead. Question number 122. Scenario. A release team maintains an Azure Traffic Manager profile that currently uses performance routing. During a regional rollout, all DNS requests originating in Asia must resolve to an application endpoint hosted in Australia. The change will be made in the Azure portal. Drag the 3 required actions to the destinations in the order in which they should be performed. 3 source items are used. The available source items are as follows. Source item 1. Add replacement endpoints and map the required geographic regions. Source item 2. Reduce the DNS time to live for the application hostname. Source item 3. Change the profile to performance routing. Source item 4. Remove the endpoints currently configured in the profile. Source item 5. Change the profile to geographic routing. The destination requirements are as follows. Destination A. First action. Destination B. Second action. Destination C. Third action. The first correct mapping is remove the endpoints currently configured in the profile, mapped to first action. The second correct mapping is change the profile to geographic routing, mapped to second action. The third correct mapping is add replacement endpoints and map the required geographic regions, mapped to third action. Here's why. In the portal, an existing non-geographic profile must have its endpoints removed before the routing method is changed. New endpoints can then be added with the required region mappings, including mapping Asia to the Australian endpoint. Exam tip. Geographic routing requires every endpoint in the profile to have at least one geographic mapping. Question number 123. Scenario. A platform team needs historical evidence of Azure Pipeline's agent pool size, queue demand, and concurrency before purchasing more capacity. Which 2 methods can provide the required agent pool usage information? Select 2 answers. The available options are as follows. Option A. Query the pipeline runs analytics entity set. Option B. Open the historical usage graph for the agent pool. Option C. Review the pipeline duration report. Option D. Query the task agent pool size snapshots analytics entity set. The correct answers are option B. Open the historical usage graph for the agent pool, and option D. Query the task agent pool size snapshots analytics entity set. Here's why. The historical pool graph visualizes jobs and concurrency over time. Task agent pool size snapshots exposes historical pool size and concurrency data for custom analytics reporting. Why are the other options not correct? A. Pipeline runs describes pipeline executions, not agent pool size and consumption. C. The duration report measures run timing and does not provide the required pool capacity history. Exam tip. Use pool consumption data for capacity decisions. Pipeline duration reports answer a different performance question. Question number 124. Scenario. A team builds an ASP.NET Core service by using the following multi-stage Docker file. Line numbers are shown only for reference. 1 from mcr.microsoft.com/.net/SDK:8, a 0 AS build 2 workter /SRC 3 copy. 4 run.NET publish, C release. O/out 5 from mcr.microsoft.com/.net/SDK:8, a 0 AS final 6 copy. From equals build /out/app 7 entrypython.net/app/orders API.dll. Which line should be changed to minimize the size of the final container image? The available options are as follows. Option A, line 7. Option B, line 2. Option C, line 5. Option D, line 4. The correct answer is option C, line 5. Here's why. The final stage should use the smaller ASP.NET Core runtime image, such as MC or .microsoft.com/.NET/ASP.NET:8.0, instead of carrying the full SDK into production. Why are the other options not correct? A. YNTRYPOGNT does not determine the base image size. B. Changing workdir does not remove SDK components. D. The publish command is required to create deployable output and already uses release mode. Exam tip. Use an SDK image for build stages and a runtime-only image for the final stage. Question number 125. Scenario. A delivery team is defining test stages for a customer-facing service. Complete each statement by selecting the most appropriate test type. Statement 1. Verifying communication between the service and its database and message broker requires the blank test. The choices for Statement 1 are smoke, integration, acceptance, or unit. Statement 2. Exercising one class while replacing all external collaborators with test doubles requires the blank test. The choices for Statement 2 are load, unit, integration, or acceptance. Statement 3. Measuring whether the service sustains the expected concurrent user volume requires the blank test. The choices for Statement 3 are acceptance, smoke, load, or unit. For Statement 1, the correct selection is integration. The test crosses component boundaries and validates real dependencies. For Statement 2, the correct selection is unit. The code unit is evaluated independently of its dependencies. For Statement 3, the correct selection is load. Load testing evaluates scalability and performance under demand. Exam tip. Unit means isolated code, integration means dependency interaction, and load means capacity under demand. Question number 126. Scenario. A configuration package used by Azure Machine Configuration must ensure that Microsoft Defender Antivirus is installed on Windows Server machines and that its service is active. Complete the DSC resource declarations. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Windows feature Defender feature name equals Windows Defender. Ensure equals the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are running, present, or enabled. Statement 2. Service Defender service name equals WinDefend. Startup type equals automatic. State equals the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are started, automatic, or running. For Statement 1, the correct selection is present. Present is the valid desired state for installing a Windows feature. For Statement 2, the correct selection is running. Running is the service state value that enforces active execution. Exam tip. In DSC, feature installation uses ensure, while service execution uses state. Question number 127. Scenario. A repository uses short-lived feature branches. Its validation pipeline fails whenever code coverage is 92% or lower. Pull requests target the trunk branch named production. What should you configure to prevent a pull request from merging until the validation pipeline succeeds? The available options are as follows. Option A. A required build validation branch policy on production. Option B. A branch policy on every feature branch. Option C. A publish test results task without a branch policy. Option D. A scheduled pipeline on production. The correct answer is Option A. A required build validation branch policy on production. Here's why. A build validation policy on the pull request target branch queues the coverage checking pipeline and blocks completion until that required validation succeeds. Why are the other options not correct? B. Policies on source feature branches do not protect merges into production. C. Publishing results alone does not enforce a merge gate. D. A scheduled run is not mandatory pull request validation. Exam tip. Apply merge enforcement policies to the protected target branch, not to every temporary source branch. Question number 128. Scenario. An Azure DevOps integration requires a personal access token named BuildBot60. The token must manage source code, queue and read builds, read release information, and expire after 60 days. No broader permissions are permitted. Complete the PAT configuration. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate option from its drop-down list. Statement 1. Set the code scope to the blank. The choices for Statement 1 are read and write, or read, write, and manage. Statement 2. Set the build scope to the blank. The choices for Statement 2 are read and execute, or read, execute, and manage. Statement 3. Set the release scope to the blank. The choices for Statement 3 are read, write, and manage, read, or read and write. Statement 4. Set the expiration period to the blank. The choices for Statement 4 are 30 days, 90 days, or 60 days. For Statement 1, the correct selection is read, write, and manage. Managing repositories requires the highest code scope listed. For Statement 2, the correct selection is read and execute. This permits reading build data and queuing or executing builds without broader administration. For Statement 3, the correct selection is read. The integration only needs to view release information. For Statement 4, the correct selection is 60 days. This matches the required token lifetime. Exam tip. For PAT questions, satisfy each requested capability independently and avoid broader scopes or longer lifetimes. You have completed Part 3 of the AZ-400 practice series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.